This is just a quick tutorial on using Lightroom and Photoshop to merge several images into an HDR 32-bit image. I'm starting in Lightroom in this case, and I have highlighted 4 images which are down here on the film strip. And when you highlight the 4 images, you just click on one end, press Shift and click on the other, and then go to Photo and Photo Merge and choose the HDR option. When you choose the HDR option, you get a new window like this, and it creates an HDR preview, and you can click Auto Align to make sure the images are lined up okay, and then you can choose deghosting if you think there may be some movement of the subject matter. And then once you wait a few seconds, it gives you a preview of what it will look like, and then it turns so that you can click the merge button at the bottom here. We won't wait for that to go, but that's basically all you do. You wait for this to finish creating the preview, and then you press merge. When you've done that, you will end up next to your row of selected images which you have merged together. You will get a HDR image, and you can tell which one it is because when you hover over it, the title of the image has HDR DNG at the end of it, so you can tell which one it is. So I'm going to double click on that one that I prepared earlier, and then you have the option to adjust your exposure and your highlights and your shadows in the usual way, as if you're using the basic panel in Lightroom. So I can turn my highlights down if I want more detail in the sky. I can turn my shadows up if I want more detail in the foreground. Or I can tweak the exposure so I think the whole thing becomes brighter, and then I can turn my highlights down again. I can turn my exposure down, and as you can see, I can turn my exposure down a huge amount, so I'm -3 stops already on here, and I've still got details in the image, and I can go quite a lot into the overexposure side. You see I'm over 2.5 stops here, and I've still got details there too. And that's because this is a 32-bit image which retains a huge amount of data in your image file. So you can do all the usual adjustments, the whites, the blacks, the texture, the clarity, etc, etc. And because it has such a huge amount of tonal range, you can really tweak it to get all the best excuse me, all the best tones in the areas that you want them. You can still use the other tools like the local adjustments up here on the top as well. If you're a Photoshop user, it's quite similar. You basically go into Photoshop, choose File and Automate, and go to Merge to HDR Pro. I can't do that because I've already got one here that's opened. But yeah, you just go to File, Automate, Merge to HDR Pro, and you get an image here, and then you get a dialog box that opens up and gives you an option to choose between 16-bit and 32-bit. In the 16-bit mode, there are options for tonal adjustments in that new panel. If you choose 32-bit mode, all the options you get, it says do tonal correction in ACR. So I chose that option. I chose 32-bit and do the tonal corrections in Adobe Camera Raw, and I ended up with this new window which is Camera Raw and an image in Camera Raw that I can do more or less the same as I was just doing in Lightroom. So I can adjust the exposure, contrast, highlights, etc. And as I said, because it's a 32-bit image, I've got such a lot of control because all the detail was extracted from 4 original files that were exposed differently. So there's a very overexposed one, a couple of middlingly exposed ones, and a very underexposed one. And the HDR program has extracted all the details, all the midtones from all those different images and blended them into one to give you a huge amount of exposure control. When you use Lightroom to do this, it automatically merges them into a 32-bit image. If you use Photoshop, it gives the option to use a 16-bit image and use the tweaks in the new panel, or opt for a 32-bit image and use Adobe Camera Raw to do the exposure adjustments and the tonal range adjustments afterwards.